the Super Bowl, one of the biggest sports events in the world. And big events deserve big stadiums. That's why we're building the venue for this year's Super Bowl right into the heart of our city. I'm Imperatur, and in this video we are recreating this world-famous multi-purpose stadium in its unique shape in City Skylines 2. It will be the centerpiece of our newly built downtown and the newest addition to my one tile per episode series, Fort Francia Bay. This episode is sponsored by Adam Kroon. Thanks for your massive support to the channel on Patreon. There you will find access to save games, mod lists and more. Thank you so much. Just in time for this year's Super Bowl, which will take place on February 10th in the Ceasars Superdome in New Orleans, I thought it would be really cool if our city and City Skylines could also have such a great stadium. It recently got renovated to be up to date to today's standards. Another fun fact is also that it's the venue with the most hosted Super Bowls in NFL history. So I put together various elements and components to build this arena from scratch. It is built completely custom, as 1 year after the release there are still no stadiums in CS2, let alone the Superdome. It is now sponsored by Caesars, which is an entertainment firm that has casinos, hotels and golf clubs. But the Caesar figure on the roof was a bit too complicated for me to design with just the surfaces. Maybe someone wants to upload a massive Caesars decal on PDX mods? Then I will definitely rebrand it, or something completely custom like my head. Then it's the Ceasars Superdome. But I wasn't creative and named the arena after the former sponsor Mercedes-Benz, which logo I put later in the episode on the roof, as you already saw in the intro. Mercedes is the best car brand in the world, and it was a good way to manifest that in my city build as well. They were the sponsor of the dome for many years, and many of you will probably still know it under that branding. The Super Bowl is always a huge spectacle and is one of the most important sporting events of the year. Even here in Europe many people watch it, but I have to be honest, I've never watched it myself, if then only the highlights. In Europe you would have to stay up all night to watch it, and most of the time I was already asleep or somewhere in the nightlife. Maybe this year, but only if you give the video a like. As you've just seen, I used these tall brownish pillars and placed them 3 times underneath each other to create a circle around the raised land I drew before with the footpaths. Like that, we have one that we can angle inwards, one that stays horizontal and one that leans outwards at the top of the structure. Unfortunately, I couldn't use the line tool. It would certainly have been easier with that, but the pillars were so completely embedded in the ground that they were totally unusable. Some mechanics are just weird in this game. At first, it looks like an oversized cooling tower, but with the roof on top, you can definitely see where the arena was inspired. The dimensions aren't quite right, as it's about 30 meters smaller in diameter than the original and maybe a little higher, but I had to adapt it to the scaling of City Skylines, and I wanted to fit it in this space. Originally I haven't planned this location for an arena though. That was all because I was just inspired this week to build the Superdome. I wanted to build a football stadium anyway, but it would have looked strange again because I had to custom build it myself too, with all the stands. Back then I haven't even thought about an indoor venue. But back to the scale. The scale of CS cities is always a little smaller than real life cities, even if it doesn't necessarily look like it. My city with only 80,000 inhabitants certainly doesn't need 3 stadiums like it has now, but let's assume that this is a metropolitan region with several million inhabitants. So what about the roof design? I first wanted to make the roof completely with the terraforming tool, so that you get a nice curve and then just cover everything with a white surface. But this was very hard to do with the available tools and didn't look smooth enough. I tried really long and hard and somehow it didn't work, so I looked for several different props that I could have used, and in the end I came across the stadium stands. They weren't ideal either, and the roof doesn't look super good and doesn't have a smooth surface, but it is a bit shiny and has a bit of a metallic look, which doesn't look too bad, but of course I would have liked a different solution. construction. Only terrain was definitely not possible, because the posts around the outside, which represent the copper colors of the Superdome's coating, manipulate the ground, and you don't have any earth up to the very edge. But I needed it on the very top nonetheless for the logo, so I came up with the solution you see on screen. I never thought I'd draw the Mercedes logo in City Skylines, but here we are. First I used the white lines because they are relatively easy to build geometric shapes with. Then I filled them in with black and gray surfaces so that the logo is easily recognizable from afar. And because it is not a decal, it doesn't disappear when you zoom out, which is quite cool. You can really see it from any distance, and I think the stadium looks extremely cool from a further away, but you can definitely see a few things that just aren't as cleanly accomplished, but also would have required several hours more effort. I think it wouldn't have made a real difference anyway, and not everything has to be overly perfect. I'm more interested in the big picture anyway, and especially when you're driving past in first person mode with trains or something like that, I think it looks perfectly fine. After that we'll be finished with the roof and we'll just have to build a base for the Superdome to finish it. Now we build the base where all the doors are, where the people can walk in when there is an event. The shape is more or less a square but with rounded edges, which I'll draw in here with roads so that we can place buildings along them later. I found a commercial building that was perfect for this if you lower it a little into the ground. This only works with the static building mod because that doesn't change the terrain around the buildings. But the assets are then of course not functional, but that's not bad at all, because I'll hide different buildings in the Superdome off camera so that it will have a function and offer many jobs and a reason for citizens to go here. Otherwise it would have been a total dead zone. Unfortunately it's not yet a real stadium with a game day mechanic. That aspect of the game is definitely missing, and I would be really interested if the infrastructure around it could handle all the people. Now that the stadium is in place, we also had to adapt the road network around the stadium so that everything fits in very well with the urban landscape. We had this highway here, which of course acted as an outer boundary, which is why I couldn't make the stadium about 220 meters in diameter as it is in real life, because otherwise it would have been a bit too big. But to be honest, that would have been way too overkill for the scale of the city anyway, so I didn't want the highway to go around it in a strange curve, although that would certainly have worked. But now I'm not going to change the whole build because it took an extremely long time and was very time consuming to build the stadium as it is now in the first place. It was really a lot of trial and error, and yes, that's part of the build process sometimes. It also takes some time until you have roughly planned what you want to build so that everything fits perfectly. Next to the stadium, we are building a simple diamond highway exit, which is certainly not designed for very high traffic volumes. I was also thinking that when you leave the highway at the exit, you can use this U-turn to go back in the other direction and exit where there will be most of the parking garages for the stadium. In general, however, I thought that the stadium is surrounded by many underground parking garages, or rather it is also a level above street level in general. On this lower level there are all the things that the visitor is not supposed to see, that is the entire stadium infrastructure that is needed to enable smooth operations. I also don't know where all the vehicles came from here at once, because there weren't that many vehicles in the cinematic shots I took after I finished the build, but I think it also has to do with the rush hour traffic mechanic. Here in the center we also widen the road from 3 to 4 lanes and use the traffic line tool to make the exits the way we want them, for example with 2 lanes for left turns. Then all that's missing is to build the perimeter of the stadium with footpaths, because the base plate, where the main access to the arena is, will be accessible to pedestrians almost everywhere. And it's a place where you can relax and where there are some fan stores or small bars, but also accesses to the parking garage and seating areas with benches and some shady trees. There will also be an overpass over the wide road and an overpass over the highway as well. Pedestrians will have relatively easy and simple access to the surrounding neighborhoods. It was also particularly important to me that access to the main station is relatively convenient, but we may have to widen the sidewalk a bit. That's why we have stairs here that go down to street level, and then you only have a 200-meter or so walk to the main station, which is of course great because the stadium is also very well connected to public transport, unlike many other American football stadiums with huge swaths of parking lots around them. You'll namely have the metro and the various train lines at the main station. But there will also be a streetcar stop directly in front of the stadium, so you can also take the streetcar from the main station if you don't want to walk the distance. So when I think about it, this is actually the perfect place for a stadium, and I don't even know why I didn't consider building one on this site beforehand. But now I quite like it, and also the view of the skyline looks better if you have a stadium there instead of just buildings. Or what do you think? Here behind the stadium, on the opposite side to the city center, are the large parking garages for all the people who want to travel to the games or concerts by car. I use these new large parking garages for this, but I also use these smaller ones with the 2 levels. I'm not quite sure about the design though, because the ramp to the upper level is quite steep and I think it looks a bit unrealistic, and then the whole thing is relatively low effort in my opinion, but definitely better than nothing. But the cool thing is we do have this kind of tunnel portals and can use them to suggest that the parking spaces underneath go much further instead of just being limited to the asset itself. In addition, these tunnels can be used for transportation routes to the stadium if various things need to be delivered, such as all the food for the snack bars inside. In the last chapter, we decorate the entire foundation that we built in the last 2 chapters, so that everything fits in really well with the cityscape. We have these grey footpaths here, but to make everything a bit more interesting in terms of color, I thought I'd use the red brick surfaces again and make the whole build harmonious with a bit of planting. I'll leave a few patches of green, surround them with hedges and add a few trees. Then I will also cover everything with these stain decals, but maybe I'll also remove some of them again, as it doesn't have to look too dirty and worn out. What do you think of the design? Here you can see how I place office and commercial buildings, but also some residential buildings inside the stadium, so that it is at least a bit functional. In Cities 1 there were these small cubes in the workshop that had all sorts of functions like all zones or services. But here you still have to use some normal buildings, as we don't have anything like this available in CS2 yet. At the very end I will also close the remaining gap that was left on the other side of the highway with several high-rise buildings, but also with mid-density office and commercial buildings. This should simply be a smooth transition from the city center to neighborhoods a little further away, and it's a gradient skyline with skyscrapers in the middle and lower buildings further away to the edges. It's always important to me that everything is coherent from all the different angles. Very cool that you stuck around to the end and watched me build the next part of our ever-growing metropolis, Fort Francia Bay. I'm definitely really pleased with how everything turned out. Here we can see the before and after, and I think the downtown takes more and more shape with every new episode. How everything will develop and how big the skyline will get you'll see in future episodes, so stay tuned and subscribe not to miss any of the next videos. Maybe I inspired you to build and detail your very own Super Bowl worthy stadium in your city too. Who knows? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, you can give the video a like. If you want to support me further, you can visit my Patreon site. There you will find the save game for every episode, and with this addition, the city has definitely become a bit more amazing and bigger. You're very welcome to explore everything yourself down to the last detail. But don't forget to download all the mods I used. It's just a few clicks, and in under 1 minute you can already hop into the game when you follow all the instructions on my pinned Patreon post. The graphics and luminous settings you will find there as well. And we can also chat a bit and have a nice time, of course. I would like to thank all the people who have already decided to support me on Patreon so much. I'm absolutely speechless of your support over there, and exactly this support makes videos like this on such a regular basis even possible. So if you want to see more, you know what to do. But now I say see you for the next episode, when we'll continue with the next build until we fill out the complete map, until my PC starts going up in flames. So please give a like if you support the project. Have a nice day and ciao ciao for now.